Hey everyone, I'm Father Alex,
We have too much fun. This is Father David Marshall. Good to see all of you.
and this is a Bridge Between, where we bridge our knowledge of the gospel. We bridge transitions from one episode to another with some music from what, the 60s or the 50s?
Oh, come on. The Beatles that's the 60s, man.
Oh, I didn't, to be honest, didn't even know it was the Beatles.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
It's that movie that from Ferris Bueller, right? So I don't think they heard the song, and we don't have the rights to play it. So I don't
So
want to
let's
get you.
not, let's
Let's
not,
not get in trouble.
it was twist and shout. We will go with that.
Yes. Yeah, which
And,
actually they stole from somebody else. It was not their. They covered it. So
well,
yeah. So it wasn't their original, but
and what else are we bridging on for this Sunday, the 18th of June?
We are bridging this question of who Jesus is. Who is this guy? What's he about? What motivates him? What drives him? All that type of stuff. That we're going to be talking about Jesus. That you've probably heard his name before, and his name is not a swear word, right? You don't do it when you drop a wrench on your foot.
Yeah.
That this is something. It's a real guy who walked around on the planet, and he told us a lot of things about ourselves and himself. And so we're going to be bridging some of that today and probably through the rest of the summer as well. And what did we hear Jesus say last week, Alex?
We heard him say last week who he came to see, who he came to save, which was not the righteous, but the sinners.
The
So
sinner.
me and you.
Yeah, yeah. And so in between times, the last time I've seen you, I decided to do a little more research into that word. And the Greek dictionary is talking about it as remembering that, I'm sorry, let me get the actual word. For those who are not free from sin, in this sense, it means all people. So those who are not free. Um, so yeah, so you and me, us, the we, everybody listening, all of that. So we're going to
And
pick this up still in chapter 9. Oh, I'm sorry, did you have more to
no, I
say?
was saying we have a great text today that talks about just this.
Yeah. And so we're starting, continuing Matthew 9. We'll start in verse 35. Jesus went about all the cities and villages, teaching in their synagogues and proclaiming the good news of the kingdom and curing every disease and every sickness. When he saw the crowds, he had compassion for them
Yeah.
because they were harassed and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. Then he said to his disciples, "The harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few.
Hmm.
Therefore ask the Lord of the harvest to send out laborers into his harvest."
Yeah. The first word in there that I love is the word compassion, because it really talks about that not just Jesus was moved, oh, he saw something and it was kind of an emotional moment. That word compassion really kind of feels like you feel it in your guts.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yes.
Whenever I think of Jesus walking around as a human being, we're aware of suffering in the world. But I wonder what his reaction was to seeing the level of suffering that he was encountering and how that must have just affected him, in that emotional, very physical way. And it goes to show that Jesus is not a robot. He's a
Right.
person that he's a human being. He's divine, but he's a human being who has this sense of being affected by other people's suffering. Um,
And this gets to the heart or the who is of Jesus, the heart of God, is that there are a lot of ways you can look at a crowd. And if for parents, for those that are grandparents, those who have been teachers, and you've got kids pressing in on you and they're all asking for something else, and it gets kind of annoying and tedious, and you just want to run away.
mhm.
Um, when Jesus saw the crowds, now these are people with diseases and sicknesses. These are the people that are not the righteous. They are not the clean and all that stuff and fresh smelling. Um, he saw them, and it's not that he said, "I need to get away from these people. Somebody else deal with this problem. This isn't my problem.
Yeah.
Y'all are sick. You need to get better." No, he had compassion, and this is who Jesus is: compassion. And
And
in his, yeah, I'm sorry. Mhm.
and the important part is, what is his reaction?
Right.
He doesn't just sit back. He says, well, obviously there needs to be a reaction to this, which is what's going to happen next.
What's going to happen next? Right. He had disciples with him, and we skipped over the part where he was calling them. But well, actually, we'll probably circle back at some point to that one. But he took the people that he has following him, the ones who will be setting up the structure of this new system, this new way of believing, that the Episcopal Church is calling the Jesus movement. The leaders of this movement, he prepares to go out into the harvest as laborers. That not only does he have compassion, but he backs it up with the people who are with him. Because Jesus can do it himself, but he then gives them the ability, the authority, the power to bring healing and wholeness to all of God's people. It's a beautiful image.
Well, and one of the things I would say is that Jesus calls on these laborers for the harvest because he can't do it on his own. He's only got 2 hands and 2 feet. He can't be everywhere at once. And that's, like I said, he sees the extent of the suffering and knows there has to be as proportional a response as you can provide. Right. And the idea of the sheep without a shepherd, that's a very dangerous place for a sheep.
Mm-hmm. Have you ever seen a duck and the ducklings?
Oh, yeah.
And how the ducklings follow? Yeah. Yeah. I've heard this translated modernly with us is it's like ducklings without a mother. That those ducklings, they're going to be eaten quickly.
Oh, yeah.
You know, that they don't know how to be protected. They don't know a thing. And instead of saying, well, it sucks to be them, right? Jesus is like, I'm sending the best people I have, the ones who are following me. I'm sending them out to be mother ducks for the ducklings, to bring them in.
Well, and, just to kind of go back to the sheep analogy, the shepherd provides guidance, provides, food, and provides, safety. And those are the things that Jesus is calling us back to. And relating last week with this week, one of the things that we might say is that if we're not careful, we could end up with the wrong shepherd.
Okay.
Or we could end up believing we can shepherd ourselves and that everything will be all right. And I see that so much in today's society of basically saying, you are your own shepherd, for lack of a better way of saying it. And as a result, we can end up in some very difficult situations that we then cannot get ourselves out of.
Mm-hmm. He also talked about, last week, we talked about physician and healing and all that. The shepherd is the veterinarian, is the doctor.
Yeah.
And there's this image of how a shepherd, and I've seen it done in modern days, where they take, and sheep are pretty large animals, that they hold the sheep with the hooves facing this way, and they lay back, and then they're able to take things out of the fur and that type of stuff from the sheep that could be causing them some sort of pain. That they're the ones that can set casts, that they can do all sorts of things to heal and to help to be able to clean their mouths, to be able to make sure their teeth are ready to eat. All of that stuff. That's what a shepherd does. And without them, the idea that a sheep could clean the sheep, right? They have hooves. They can't do the things that our fingers can. And they're sheep. They probably don't want to help others, where the shepherd is the one who does. And so the harvest is plentiful. What does that mean to you?
Well, first of all, just before I do that, I have to have just a frivolous moment of me using your image to imagine a sheep trying to floss.
Yeah, imagine that.
Sorry, that just got in my brain. And
that's pretty funny. Yeah, that wouldn't work.
I don't think it would. I don't think it would.
No.
They're really bad at that. So, but the harvest, I think, is a really good image. And the reason I like that is that for those who get down on themselves and say, okay, well, I'm a sinner. So, I guess I'm terrible and there's nothing that I can do or there's nothing that I can say, which is, accurate. But there's no place for me then. Well, I would say, well, wait a minute. Jesus has sent people in his name to go and gather you up because you're bountiful. You're going to be bountiful. You are a harvest. You're not something that's going to be wasted. And I think this is where the church can lose its direction. If we're not careful, we see the harvest, we know it's out there, but if we're not equipped and we are not equipping people to go and get the harvest, what happens if you don't go get the harvest? It rots.
Mm-hmm.
You know? And so I think that every day there are people who could be lost if they don't ever receive that invitation, if they don't ever receive that notice of saying somebody cares, somebody sees value in you that you may not even see in yourself.
Mm-hmm.
God sees the value in you. He has called you part of his harvest.
Mm-hmm. And a farmer tends to his or her harvest. My wife grows tomatoes, and tomatoes take a particular amount of work, especially in this climate, that you have to trim, you have to make sure these other leaves that aren't there, because if they grow those leaves, you won't grow tomatoes. I don't quite understand that. But she has to spray it with this particular stuff to make sure it's all clean. She's asking me to rotate it, to change the soil, all that type of stuff. And then eventually we get these tomatoes that we turn into salsa, and it's super good. But that is another way that we can view who Jesus is, to be the farmer of us, that God is tending and caring for each one of us. And although we look like we are harassed and helpless, as we are without God, in my opinion, that God is there and calling us out into the harvest, the Lord of the harvest, to send laborers into it, to do exactly what Christy does when she cares for her tomatoes, to clean and to prune and to fertilize and all that good stuff.
So I want to throw a curveball here.
Okay.
Okay. There's a line there that says the harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few.
Mm-hmm.
Today, in the church, why do you think the laborers are few?
Why don't you tell me? Because you're about to get a really caustic line coming out of me, so I'm gonna be gentle.
Boy. Okay.
No.
Do you want me to take a turn first?
Yes, please.
Okay. I'm going to say that there is kind of a reason within the church and then a reason within people. Within the church, I think we're struggling to learn how to equip people for ministry.
Yeah.
I think it's hard. It's something that has changed over the decades of how to do that.
Right.
I think there are many people who may want to get involved, but they don't know how. They may never even have been invited to participate in ministry, right?
Mm-hmm.
They may feel that I don't have the talents, or I'm too old, or I don't have whatever.
Right.
And so it's the church's job to say, nobody's born knowing how to do this. We're going to equip you.
Mm-hmm.
Within, and the personal reason I think that we have to be careful of is, aside from the whole I don't feel equipped and I don't know, is why should I care?
Ooh.
You know, why should I
Right.
care about other people?
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's somebody else's problem. I have my own problems.
Right.
And I'm not speaking about anybody in particular. I'm just saying that that can be an attitude that we might find that says, well, I want to help people, but I've got my own issues as well.
Mm-hmm.
Or that kind of person who's different from me, I don't want to get involved with that person. And we're living in a society where we think and feel that we can be islands unto ourselves, more
Right.
and more.
Right.
And it's so isolating. And we have to convince people that the gospel is about taking that first step to go say, it's not just about me.
Mm-hmm.
It is about that other person, and that I'm part of the harvest, and so are they.
Mm-hmm. You have had this experience, as have I, where we will be in a hospital to go see somebody that we know from church, whatever the case may be, and we get stopped multiple times on the way in and on the way out. Father, can I have some prayers? Father, can you help me? It's, and I know some hospital chaplains, and they are working very hard. Their harvest is plentiful. And there is one chaplain per hospital. I mean, per shift. It's the need out there is great, and it's interesting to me that like I go to Sarasota Memorial Hospital here a lot. It's one of the finest hospitals in the area. I mean, it's an amazing place.
Yes, it
They
is.
do incredible work. And so there are folks in there who want prayers, and they're getting top-notch care, but they are praying about something else. It's not just whatever it is, the condition that they're in there for, it's something else. And it's that also is the harvest of they have cares and concerns and worries. And for those listening that you've had me pray at the hospital with you, you know that it's part of my pattern or tradition that at the end of the prayer, to pray for everybody in the hospital who don't have faith, who don't have friends or family who's coming to visit, that we ask for the God of the harvest, the one who sees us as harassed and helpless, to visit them, to bring the comfort and peace and power of the Holy Spirit upon them too. So
Right.
it's amazing. And so it happened today at the networking event that I go to every Tuesday, which I adore. It's great. I was trying to leave. I had a particular appointment with a particular priest. You might know him. His name's Alexander. And
Yep.
I was late because I couldn't get to the door because there were people, oh, just one more thing, and but that's what we're called to do. So did I tell you the article about the importance of peripheral relationships? Of, you don't know their name, but you smile at them, when you're at the
Right.
gym. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
hugely important in our society.
Huge, right?
Yeah.
That you don't have to know somebody's name in order to make them feel special. And the people that you run into, the people you see all the time on the bus, right? Or all the time at the library, that person always seems, whatever it is, there's an importance with saying hello, with acknowledging them, with recognizing them. It's just, it lifts our spirit and lifts their spirits. And that's also being laborers, I think, in God's harvest.
And what I want to come back to is the idea of, the laborers are few.
Hmm.
And what I would say to that is, imagine if you had to pick a whole field of crops by yourself.
Uh-huh. Right.
But now imagine if you had 500 people to help you.
Sure.
It's one of my favorite, English sayings, so to speak, that I learned when I was in the discernment process because my sending priest was from the Church of England. He says, "Many hands make light work."
Well, yeah.
And I'd never heard that. Well, I knew what it meant, but I'd never heard it before in such a kind of cool way. And of course, he's got the accent, so that
Well,
that's an authority unto itself. But what I would say though is, we're trying as the church to do a lot of heavy lifting without getting enough hands involved.
mm,
And I think it's incumbent upon you and I as people who are called to equip people in ministry to really pay some time and attention to what does it mean to help people see how their hands are called to be part of the harvest.
yes. You asked me a question about why are there so few laborers? And I was going to give you a really caustic line. I figured out how to tone it down. So you ready?
All right.
Clericalism. We have come through a period of time
Yeah.
when pastor, father, whoever it is, knows best, right?
Father knows
And
best.
so nothing happens unless it comes through the whoever's sitting in the chair or the pastorate. And I don't think that is the model. I'm choosing my words carefully here. I don't think that's the model that Jesus chose. That when he lifted up these people and he sent them out, it is more of a decentralized system. And so those that you have in the choir, those that sing and perform music, they have a better idea than, and I hate to break it to you, Alex, than you and me about what works. That it's a decentralized system, that they can be the ones to help lead and grow that type of worship. And that's just a very small part of the church. But we are, you and I are coming out of this period of clericalism where we are trying to do what Jesus is doing, and that is raising up others to go out and serve in the way that God has blessed them. So not taking them and having them doing something entirely different than what they've ever done, but to go and to help. Like before we recorded, I told you a story about running into some quilters The quilters, one thing I should tell you about them is that they aren't quilting for themselves. They're quilting for others. That they make quilts and things for newborn babies. They make them for first responders that go in to where children are in need. And they give them not just a blanket anybody can buy at Walmart, but something that's been lovingly made for them, and that they hand them out. And so for them, the quilters, the harvest for them is they're not going to be the ones that respond out to domestic crises and stuff like that. They're not trained. They're not going to go, but they can do something that helps comfort others, and that's a part of the harvest, and that's a part of being the laborers that God is calling us to do. And it goes back to why? Because Jesus has compassion on those who are harassed and those who are helpless.
So I want to bring this back kind of to the beginning as we're getting into the last part of the podcast episode, which is what you talked about real quickly. You know, the sense of compassion, feeling it in your guts is what I call it.
Yeah.
And how even the ministry that you and I exercise is not about us. Right. It's about Jesus, and it's about the people who are there. And I think bring it back to that level of what we talked about last week, that the person who is despondent, who is ashamed, who feels broken, they're part of the harvest.
Oh, yeah.
But here's the other part. They're future laborers.
Oh, yes.
You know, that's the beauty of it, is that Jesus has this process of restoration and reconciliation that continues with empowering somebody to go back to where they were for those that got left behind, to continue to tell your story. And Jesus does this several times in Scripture. Go and tell people. Don't come with me. Go back and tell them what happened to you. And they need to hear it from that person, even though Jesus is standing right there. And so to me, that's part of what I think the church's effort should be, is to help people recognize not just where they've gone astray, but what would the world look like if they walked the path Jesus had set for them and become a laborer in the vineyard.
Because the harvest is plentiful,
but the laborers are few. Yeah.
Amen.
So I want to thank you.
And I want to thank you.
Well, I want to thank you because I kind of had an idea that you were going to go down that clericalism route, and if not, I was going to mention it. But I'm very glad that we could kind of step back even from our own roles and realize just how important it is that everyone in the church contribute. And I want to end with this one last thought, which is, if you go to the Book of Common Prayer and you ask it, who are the ministers of the church? What's the first group that's labeled in the Catechism?
Do you want me to look it up right now?
Actually, I'll just give it to you.
All right.
It says laypersons.
Well, yes.
Laypersons.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot more of them than there are of clergy, rightly so. And so I guess what I want to say is that my resolution, my resolve is to help people live into that.
Right. Yeah. So the Book of Common Prayer, the way it's structured, it tends to lend itself to say the highest calling is that of holy orders. To which I say, I don't think so. The highest calling is that of somebody who writes checks. And I'm sorry to bring it down to money, but the no margin, no ministry, right? That the laborers, the ones who are just doing the small, important work, those who can give a little bit, those who can give a tremendous amount, that has to be the highest calling. That holy orders makes us the servants of the church, not for the church to serve us. And so the Book of Common Prayer listed lay people first, because that is the first and primary order of business, is that it is about the lay people who do the work, the lay people who are supporting and underwriting and guiding and leading and all of that with the church. And then the small number of us who have been set aside, anointed, ordained, lifted up to serve God in a very, very specific purpose. We too are loved. We too have been set aside. We too, it is a high calling. But I I get concerned when we say it's the highest.
Well, I
Um,
wouldn't. I'm not going to go ahead and say it's the highest. I think the highest calling is who Jesus labels as the greatest in the kingdom of heaven.
Amen.
That's where I'll leave it
Yes.
with that.
Yeah, that is a great way to go.
Yeah.
I know some deacons who run homeless shelters, abused women's shelters, that type of stuff.
Some laypersons as well.
Yeah,
Well,
that's the highest calling, right? That way above presiding bishop, Archbishop of Canterbury, whatever. That right with the harassed and helpless. That's where God is. I mean, sorry, I'm feeling as if I'm stepping to the pulpit, so I'm going to pull back. You were doing such a nice job at wrapping it up, and and then I messed that up. So sorry about that.
that's okay. It was good to spend this time with you, and I'm looking forward to our next time and the next bridge that we're going to cross together.
I look forward to that bridge as well.
All right.
Thank you for
Well,
being my friend.
thank you for being my friend, and thanks everyone for watching and listening.
God bless.
God bless.